Good afternoon, just on 12. My name is Alexandra Gannoni. I'm a senior research analyst with the online Sexual Exploitation of Children research program at the AIC. And today we're presenting on preventing child sexual abuse material offending, an international review of initiatives. So a bit of a different perspective. We're looking at offenders. Sorry. Is this my clicker? Okay. All right. So in terms of this study, what we'll be talking about today are the results of a review. And this was undertaken with my great co-authors, Alexandra Gannoni, who is here today, Sarah Napier, who's chairing, and also Dr. Hayley Boxall. And this research report, which I'm excited to announce, will soon be released on our AIC website at aic.gov.au. So the paper is based on a study undertaken in 2021, and this study is one component of a broader project which is funded through the Proceeds of Crime Act in Australia, or POCA. And I do just want to acknowledge the Department of Home Affairs and the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet's National Office for Child Safety for their valuable feedback and advice on the report. And we are also so grateful for the contributions and input of all child sexual abuse material offending prevention project advisory group members. This was a project advisory group which included experts and practitioners in the child sexual abuse space from across the world, and their advice to this project has been really invaluable. Okay, so I just want to start by providing a bit of background and talk about child sexual abuse material as a problem that's happening right across the world, and it's also flourishing with ongoing advances in technology. According to the Virtual Global Task Force, police globally struggle to detect CSAM offending due to the use of darknet and enhanced encryption technologies, where people are viewing child sexual abuse material basically anonymously. But what's really important here is there's been a significant increase in the amount of child sexual abuse material available online, and I'll just give you a few examples of what we're seeing. So in 2021, the Australian Centre to Counter Child Sexual Exploitation, also known as the ACE, and it sits just under the AFP, they received more than 33,000 reports of child sexual abuse material. Each report can contain multiple images and or videos of children being sexually assaulted or exploited. And in the past 12 months alone, the ACE has reviewed more than 217,000 media files that relate to reports of child sexual abuse and exploitation. In 2021, the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children Cyber Tip Line, and this is a way of people to report this material, received 29.3 million reports of suspected child sexual abuse material, and this was an increase by 35% from 2020. And secondly, I just want to set the scene by talking about the need for early intervention. So there has been growing recognition in recent years of the need to prevent people viewing child sexual abuse material in the first place, not simply relying on intervening when people come into contact with the criminal justice system. So I just want to give you a couple of quick examples of what we're seeing in reviews in this area. So the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse identified a gap in Australia in interventions for those at risk of perpetrating child sexual abuse, including child sexual abuse material. And it noted a need for a national strategy to encompass complementary initiatives, including information help-seeking services to support people who are concerned that they may be at risk of sexually abusing children or viewing CSAM. Various international reviews have echoed this need to provide prevention interventions for the diverse populations that seek help, including those who have not offended but attempted to use child sexual abuse material, and those who may be viewing child sexual abuse material but are not known to police, and who really need help to stop this. And given the enormous amount of child sexual abuse material on the internet, we have a moral obligation to stop this from happening. So I know we had a few presentations, the definitions, I'll just quickly skim over this, but I'm just going to start by defining what we mean by child sexual abuse material, or CSAM, which I'll use for ease throughout the presentation from now on. But there's obviously many different terms that you'll see in the literature, such as child abuse material, child sexual exploitation material, or online child sexual exploitation or offending. But regardless of the terms used, it's just important to know that it refers to any type of material. So images, videos, even live streaming, depicting a child in a sexual context, and it is sexual abuse. And there's a spectrum of what CSAM may include, so it might be, nudity, but it can range right through to rape or torture. And I'd also like to start by defining what we mean by prevention. So in the context of this study, we are referring to not just preventing reoffending, but also preventing offending from happening in the first place. One way to think about prevention can be to break it into different levels. So you'll see here the use of primary, secondary and tertiary prevention. And this has come from the public health model, and then it's basically been adapted into the criminal justice space. But it's really just a way of understanding who we are referring to, or our target audience, when we talk about prevention. So just really quickly, primary prevention, this refers to wide-scale initiatives targeting like the general population, and that's aimed at preventing offending from occurring in the first place. Secondary prevention, this is efforts or initiatives targeting groups that are at greater risk of CSAM offending, so it might include those who are concerned about their thoughts or behaviour around children, and that's aimed at preventing offending as well. And tertiary prevention, initiatives targeting individuals with known CSAM offending, for example, convicted offenders, and this is aimed at preventing reoffending. And in Australia, tertiary prevention is typically refers to criminal justice responses. So, given the volume of CSAM on the internet and difficulty in detecting offending, it's important to tackle this crime from multiple angles, so complementing the important work of law enforcement rather than relying solely on it. And while there is a lack of programs catering to individuals who have not offended against children but are at risk of offending, or those who have offended but have not been detected by police in Australia, such programs do exist internationally. It's important to know what's happening out there in terms of these initiatives, and also where there's evidence of success to help inform best practice in this area. So this study had two key aims. The first one was to identify prevention initiatives for CSAM offending across a continuum from helplines through to treatment. And secondly, to review and summarise the available evidence about their implementation and effectiveness. We did this via a literature search of academic and grey literature databases, online searches of program websites, and via the project advisory group, which were particularly helpful in identifying initiatives in their country or jurisdiction, as well as helping us source unpublished evaluations. Okay, so what did we find? Okay, so we identified 76 prevention initiatives located in 15 different countries across Australia, Canada, Europe, New Zealand, the UK and the US. 50 of these practiced tertiary prevention, 44 practiced secondary prevention, and 9 practiced primary prevention. We then categorised the initiatives into 5 different intervention types according to their main intervention of focus, and this included phone and text helplines and online chat help services, therapeutic treatment and psychoeducation, online self-help and self-management courses and tools, education and awareness campaigns, and other forms of support. And I know there's a lot there, but I'm just going to really briefly highlight a few key things about each of these. Okay, so we identified 6 initiatives that currently provide phone or text helplines or online chat help services. For example, the Stop It Now helplines in Belgium, the Netherlands, the UK and Ireland, and the US. Safe to Talk in New Zealand, and Prevent Tell in Sweden. So I've just put a couple of examples of the wording that you might come across if you visit a helpline website. So the first one is the Stop It Now UK and Ireland helpline, and the second one is Prevent Tell in Sweden. As you can see, the helplines are mainly aimed at secondary prevention. They typically provide free, anonymous, confidential support for individuals worried about their sexual thoughts or behaviour regarding children. But one thing that's important to note here is that in some countries, particularly those in Europe, the legal situation requires therapists to maintain confidentiality regarding previous or possible future child sexual abuse. But in other countries, such as in Australia, mandatory reporting laws require therapists to disclose undetected acts of child sexual abuse. So with this in mind, helplines that offer confidential and anonymous support may actually provide a way for those who may be tempted to view CSAM or those who are looking at it at the moment but undetected and need intervention, need help. It is a way for them to actually accept help, particularly where those strict and mandatory reporting laws exist. So this is something to keep in mind with the helplines. Okay, we identified 34 initiatives that provide therapeutic treatment or psychoeducation. This was across Australia, Canada, various countries in Europe, New Zealand, the UK and the US. Some are aimed at known offenders, and then some are aimed at undetected offenders, and some also cater to both. As you can see, this is an AIC paper about the development of the Coping with Child Exploitation Material Use Program. This is, as I understand, currently being piloted here in Australia. Victoria, it's a largely psychoeducation-based program for those who have engaged in CSAM-only offending, so they haven't, there's been no contact child sexual offending. What's important here is that there's a growing number catering exclusively to CSAM offending, and this has mainly been due to the growing recognition that those who engage in CSAM offending likely differ in their treatment needs to those who engage in contact child sexual abuse. So the main one being that they are generally seen as having a lower risk of offending, and therefore generally require a lower dosage treatment when comparing it to child sexual abuse more broadly. When we looked at programs broadly at child sexual abuse, which included CSAM, compared with those exclusively aimed at CSAM, there were a few just things that stood out. So CSAM-only initiatives tend to be shorter in their duration. They're much more structured in their approach. They rely heavily on psychoeducation, if not some of the programs are purely psychoeducation. They're more often than not community-based, and they have program components on internet-specific factors, things such as addiction, impulsivity, fantasy, and also things around internet use and what's appropriate, what's not, what's illegal, things like that. Okay, so we identified 7 initiatives that provide online self-help or self-management courses or tools. And I probably found these the most interesting. Examples included Help Wanted in the US, Troubled Desire in Germany. They mainly contribute to secondary prevention. They all provide free, anonymous and confidential support. But while these initiatives may be based or developed in a particular country, they are generally accessible to users from everywhere across the globe. So you could go online right now and you could begin one of these programs, and it's actually that simple. One thing that stood out the most was the lengths that these programs go to protect users' confidentiality, and where possible for them also to be anonymous, For example, the Help Wanted initiative in the US, they state on their website that they do not record IP addresses or geographic location. They do not set or use persistent or cross-site cookies. They use only session cookies that are cleared after each visit. And they do not use browser fingerprinting or any other method to identify users across visitors. And I really love this quote. This is from a study that was looking at Prevented in Sweden about the purpose in this. And it says here, it's to increase participant comfort about their interactions with the program, given their concerns about privacy and possibly being identified as engaging in illegal behaviour. The anonymity gives individuals an opportunity to seek care and to be more open and truthful than they might be with an in-person therapist. So it's about getting help and to people. And this is a picture from the redirection program, and you won't be able to read it all. But I just wanted to give you an overall idea and overall feel of what the program is like. So the initiatives typically use psychoeducation and cognitive behavioural approaches and focus on increasing understanding of the issue, developing prevention strategies and moving forward in a positive, non-offending way. Further, they are self-paced, relatively short. For example, each module might be like 10 minutes each, or etc. They're generally completed independently of a third person, like a therapist. And there is usually at most of the stages, like information on where to seek further help. So we identified 8 initiatives that provide education and awareness campaigns, for example, the Stop It Now deterrence campaign in the UK. The ones in our review generally contribute to primary and secondary prevention. Some of these initiatives aim to raise awareness of the problem, for example, that viewing CSAM is illegal, that it's not a victimless crime. Some also aim to encourage undetected offenders and those at risk of offending to seek help, for example, to use help-seeking services such as online resources or helplines. I'm not very tech savvy. And finally, then there were other forms of support, such as the circles of support and accountability, and some other really interesting and innovative prevention initiatives, which I don't have time to go into today. But just quickly, when looking at initiatives in terms of secondary prevention as a whole, definitely there was a lot more happening in the UK, the US, across Europe, and even New Zealand. But there's less so in Canada and Australia. But there have definitely been some recent developments happening in these countries. Some of you might have heard that Stop It Now, a new Stop It Now program, has just recently launched here in Australia. Okay. All right, so what did we find from reviewing the evidence? This included 35 eligible studies across 17 programs that we included in this review. Programs were either subject to a process evaluation or an outcome evaluation or both. And I'm just going to very briefly highlight some of the key findings of this. So, the first one being education and awareness campaigns have attracted large numbers of undetected offenders and those at risk of offending to seek help. For example, the Stop It Now in UK and Ireland is supported through an associated multi-channel campaign to deter viewing of CSAM. And during their 2019-20 campaign period, they had 193,277 website sessions in total during the campaign, and the campaign had success in driving undetected CSAM offenders to the resources, with much reported awareness of the service coming from the internet searches, news websites or Google adverts. Another example is Prevention Project Dunkelfeld in Germany. This is a therapeutic service for individuals with a sexual interest in children and adolescents, including who are already viewing CSAM or are concerned that they would view CSAM in the future. During the advertising period from 2015 to 2018, several hundred unique visitors, from 150 to over 300, accessed the English or German campaign websites each day. And the spikes in website visits typically correlated with the campaign timeframes or different campaign activities. Although this study did not measure engagement with the treatment itself, it showed the success of online campaigns in reaching an otherwise hidden population of those at risk of offending or those engaging in offending behaviours but are not known or they're not in contact with the criminal justice system. Further and more robust evaluations are required to determine the impact of many current initiatives on CSAM offending. I just want to emphasise that there is a lack of evaluation research in this area, particularly for initiatives aimed specifically at CSAM offenders. The lack of evidence of effectiveness, it does not necessarily indicate that these programs are not effective. We had only 10 studies examining effectiveness for CSAM in particular, and this is mainly due to the fact that many of these programs in their very early stages of development and implementation, CSAM, in the broad picture of crime, is a relatively new crime. Many of the studies were limited by small sample sizes or a lack of control groups to be able to compare treatment outcomes to. So in our review, control groups largely referred to those who did not receive treatment. But here I think it's really important to note the ethical issues of providing treatment to one group of sexual offenders but not providing treatment to others. So we have to be creative about who can be a control group. For example, might be program dropouts. But my point is that it's not always straightforward or easy to get control groups. It's not an easy thing to do. 3, evidence is mixed regarding the effectiveness of therapeutic treatment for adults attracted to children or those targeting sexual offending in general. Several studies explored CSAM use after individuals engaged with therapeutic interventions aimed at people sexually attracted to children. These programs target all forms of child sexual abuse. For example, Prevention Project Dunkelfeld, Prevention of Sexual Abuse Program, these are both in Germany. There were some promising results that showed reduced risk factors for sexual offending, and others have found no change. And likewise, results regarding CSAM offending are mixed, with some studies reporting a reduction, others very little change. Just very quickly, one study reported showed that 32% reported they had stopped using CSAM completely after treatment. Of those who reported continued use, some reported that their frequency and severity was reduced, meaning that they were using CSAM less often or using less severe CSAM material. So it might be viewing maybe adolescent material or older children versus younger children, things like that. Another study examined CSAM-only offenders, and they found that of Prevention Project Dunkelfeld as well, 90% used CSAM either during or after treatment. And finally, a study looking at prevention of sexual abuse program found 6 of the 19 participants, so 32%, reported committing CSAM offences at follow-up. They too found that among those who continued using, the severity and types of images reduced. So while the findings are mixed, the self-report re-offending rates in these studies is higher than what we would typically see for re-offending for CSAM in criminal justice or official data. But it's important to note that these studies are based on self-reported and often undetected offending. And finally, there were a number of studies suggesting that the circles of support and accountability programs, so these are really for helping sex offenders reintegrate back into the community. There was evidence suggesting they reduced contact sexual offending, but we're yet to see any evidence suggesting they reduced CSAM offending. And while these programs definitely include CSAM offending, they've traditionally been set up for medium to high-risk sex offenders and mainly contact child sex offenders. However, the impact of new Circles programs aimed specifically at CSAM offenders who have a moderate to low risk of reoffending, such as Circles Reboot, are yet to be examined. And four, there are some initiatives specifically targeting CSAM that have showed some promising results. Programs designed specifically for CSAM offending were found to reduce the risk factors for offending, enhance protective factors. For example, Inform Plus in the UK was found to effectively target difficulties in effective and interpersonal functioning that may play a role in the offence process of CSAM users. For example, depression, emotional regulation, loneliness and self-esteem deficits. However, there was no measure of the impact of these programs on actual CSAM use. And finally, just to wrap this up, because I know I haven't got much time, the evaluation studies in this review, along with the advice from the Project Advisory Group, highlighted a number of key lessons that are likely to enhance the implementation and effectiveness of programs aimed at CSAM use. So this includes supporting programs with effective and wide-reaching media campaigns to ensure that the program is recognised by potential clients and known to professionals in the child protection space who may refer potential clients to the program. This is mainly relevant to secondary prevention, so those who may be tempted to view CSAM or those engaging in offending but are not known. Media campaigns should clearly articulate who is eligible for the program, so it should be clear that people who have not offended can also contact the service and what help the client can expect to receive. Confidentiality, providing clients with clear assurances of privacy and confidentiality, and even being able to be anonymous where possible. Again, this is extremely relevant with secondary prevention, where the fear of negative repercussions can prevent people from seeking help. Clear policies around privacy and confidentiality should be explicitly restated at all stages of contact with clients, including within media campaigns promoting the service. And clients should be warned about circumstances in which confidentiality may be breached due to the mandatory reporting requirements in the jurisdiction. And where possible, clients should be offered the option to remain anonymous when interacting with the program. Engaging with individuals in an empathetic and non-judgmental manner, while also having a clear ethical stance on the harm of CSAM or child sexual abuse and about personal responsibility of how we each must act. This is mainly relevant to secondary and tertiary prevention or at the point of dealing with clients. So staff should be approachable during each phase of contact and take the time to build rapport, provide emotional support and demonstrate sensitivity to the concerns of clients. While it's important that clients are encouraged to take responsibility for their own behaviour, staff should avoid blaming clients for their sexual thoughts regarding children or labelling clients as offenders. For ease, I have used that term in this presentation, but in terms of a practitioner context, to avoid those terms. Tailoring programs to meet the needs of those who have engaged in CSAM-only offending, rather than simply channeling these individuals into broader sexual offending programs aimed at all forms of sexual offending or child sexual abuse. Research suggests CSAM-only offenders tend to have different treatment needs and psychosocial risk factors compared to other child sex offenders. However, it's also important that we don't overgeneralise and that we recognise not all people who engage in CSAM are exactly the same. And last but not least, developing programs specifically for young people who may come across CSAM or may already be engaging with CSAM. So young people with sexually harmful behaviour have different treatment needs to adults who sexually offend, and we need to make sure that the support offered is developmentally appropriate. For example, where appropriate, the family of a young person should also be encouraged to be actively involved in the treatment process. So that's just a quick overview of some of the findings and some of the programs from our review. There are many programs I'd love to talk about, but I don't have time today. Just in conclusion, the findings from this study are important given the availability of CSAM on the internet, and the study highlighted a crucial need for further robust evaluations of programs that aim to prevent CSAM offending, which will assist in the development of future initiatives designed using best practice principles. Nevertheless, the evidence thus far relating to some programs is promising and highlights the potential for initiatives to reduce undetected and detected CSAM offending and to reach individuals at risk of offending before a child is harmed.